my name is Moni.
And I'm Naveen from Before We Play.
Today we're going to be showing you how to play a game that is currently on Kickstarter called Power Core Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, this is a two-player only game designed by Filip Głowacz and Błażej Kubacki, and it's published by Board and Dice, who are helping sponsor this video.
Yes, this is a dueling style card game set in the world of the Cthulhu mythos. Players are going to be playing with two nightmarish creatures that you combine together, and you just try to defeat your opponent. The game features a power core system where players are going to be rotating these power cores in order to gain resources and activate abilities on their cards.
Now, before we begin, we do want to mention that this is a prototype copy of the game, so things are subject to change in the future. If you are interested in the campaign, there will be a link in the description where you can check out all the details there.
All right, with that, I think we're ready to begin. So if you please direct your attention to the center of the table, we're all set up here for our two-player game of Power Core Call of Cthulhu.
Yes.
And as you can see, we are showcasing one player's perspectives because each player has a player mat as well as their own Power Core deck that is a combination of two different nightmarish creatures. And so just to kind of give you the lay of the land, in the upper left-hand corner of the playmat over here, we have the character area. And so this is where your two characters are going to stay for the entire game. At the top right-hand corner of each of their cards tells you how much health they each have. And so your health as a player is going to be the sum of those two numbers. So in this case, it's going to be 23 health.
Yep. And so the opponent over here with 15 and 13 is going to have a total sum of 28 health.
Yes, the object of the game is for you to completely eliminate your opponent by bringing their health down to 0. Or you can win the game also if your opponent runs out of cards in their deck and needs to draw up more. To the right of your character area, we have the battlefield. And so this is where a majority of your cards are going to get played. Basically, any cards that require you to use a power core, which we'll talk about in a second, get played to the battlefield, including any of your avatars. Each character that you have in play has their own corresponding avatars, and they start the game not in play. But as the game progresses, you'll have the ability to put them into play by placing them into your battlefield as well. And so we're pretty much set up. I just have to draw my starting hand of 4 cards, and we are ready to play. Now, the way that the game works is starting with the first player, we're going to be taking turns going back and forth, basically playing cards to our battlefield, activating our power cores, and taking actions in an effort to try to eliminate our opponent. And so the way that a turn works is the first thing that happens is if there are any cards in play that have any start of turn effects, then of course they would come into play first.
Sure.
And then you would start by rotating your power cores, starting with the characters in your character area. Now, when we say power core, we're referring to these squares that are attached to the characters in our character area. Over the course of the game, we're also going to be putting allies into play onto our battlefield, and those allies will also gain power cores. And so starting with the leftmost character in your character area, you're going to literally rotate their power core one space in a clockwise direction, and then gain the benefit of whatever is at the very top of the power core, which in this example is dealing 2 damage to your opponent.
Now, we do want to mention at the beginning of setup, you get to decide the order of your characters as well as the orientation of these power cores on them. And each character has their own unique power core. So this one is dedicated to the Great Wind Walker.
That's right. Now, whenever you deal damage, all damage from a single power core must be dealt to a single target. So you have to choose a single ally from your opponent or your opponent's entire character area. Because in this game, you're not going to eliminate a single character. All damage dealt is dealt to the entire character area. And so let's just go ahead and deal our damage to the character area because they don't have any allies or avatars in their battlefield yet. Then we would move on to our next character, again, activating our power cores from left to right. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate their power core, which is going to allow them to deal 2 damage as well. And so just so we can kind of take a look at some of the other benefits on the power cores, in addition to damage, which are these red fist symbols, you'll see these blue symbols that symbolize shields in this game, which is a primary defense. And so anytime you gain shields, you'll place them, in this case, into the character area. And so any damage dealt to the character area is first going to be negated by each of these shields. Now, let's just say, for example, that we also had this card in play, which happens to be an ability, and that this power core was assigned to it. After rotating this creature's power core, or this character's power core, we would then rotate this one, and we would gain its ability. The difference is that the card also has an extra modifier, specifically for whenever you gain shields. And so in this example, we would gain 3 shields, 1 for the power core itself, and then 2 because of the modifier on the card.
Now, when gaining these shields, you're going to choose one target to give it to. So maybe I want to protect our characters and place it in the character area.
Yep, exactly. If you had any allies or avatars in your battlefield, you could also choose one of them. But you cannot keep it on this card itself because it's just an ability. It doesn't have any health.
Right.
Now we're not done. There are more benefits to gain from this power core. In addition to the shield at the top here, you'll also notice we have this other symbol. This symbol stands for horror. And so horror looks like this, and it is the type of currency that you have in the game. You're going to be spending horror to do certain things, like, for example, our character over here says you can spend 5 horror and 1 action and take 1 wound to put one of your avatars in play. And so that's just one example of different ways that you could spend horror, but this benefit lets us gain 1. Next round, when we rotate this power core again, it's going to gain us this X symbol. And the X stands for flare. And so anytime you have a symbol that looks like that, you get to activate a flare action, which is going to be present on the card itself. Now you can only activate a flare effect if it is on the card that the actual power core is on. And so the actual action on this ability card here says you can spend 3 horror to put an avatar in play, or you spend 2 horror to activate the unmake ability of any avatar in play, which we'll talk about later.
So as you can see, there's kind of a programming aspect to the game. With this core like this, on the next turn, this will flip up, getting you 3 horror, and then eventually working down. When this one flips up, you would have a total of 4 horror to then go ahead and activate this flare ability at the bottom. So kind of planning your cores is a big core aspect of this game.
Now, whenever you rotate a power core and the red section is face up, after gaining the benefits of the power core itself, the power core as well as the card get discarded. And before we continue, I just want to briefly mention that the final symbol you'll see on these power cores is this green plus sign, and that just stands for healing. And so for each of those that you resolve, you choose 1 target and you get to remove that many wounds from that target. Once you've finished rotating and resolving all of your power cores from both your character area as well as your battlefield, then you move on to the next step of your turn, which is taking actions. At this point, you're allowed to take 2 actions, and there are 3 different options of actions that you can take. One option is you can choose to draw a card from your deck. Now, being mindful, of course, that this is also one of the timers of the game, because if at any point you need to draw a card from your deck and you have no more, then you lose.
You lose, And there is no hand limit, but at the end of your turn, you will have to discard down to 5 cards. So you have to be mindful of that as well.
Another option is you can play a card from your hand, and your deck is comprised of several different types of cards. You have maneuvers that are symbolized by an arrow at the top left-hand corner, and maneuvers are resolved and then discarded immediately. They never go into your battlefield, and they never get a power core assigned to them.
Yeah, they're just one-offs.
And if you're curious, this card says you remove all shields from one ally or character, then deal 2 damage to that ally or character.
It's good.
So there's a wide variety of things that they can do. You also have items and abilities. Unlike characters and allies, neither of these types of cards have health values, and so they cannot be targeted for attacks or shields. But when played, they're played directly to your battlefield, and you assign them a power core, just like these other types of cards. So you may want to choose a power core that has a lot of the symbols that are modified on the card itself. So in this example, this card gives us a horror modifier as well as health.
So there's no health out here, but there is horror on this particular card. Or this power core. So maybe you want to do something like that to set it up.
Yep, exactly. And when placing a new power core on the card, you always orient it so that the green side is face up, and then you refill your offer immediately. So you'll always have 3 to choose from. And the last type of cards that you'll see in your deck are allies. And allies have this like a person symbol at the top left-hand corner. They have a health meter at the top right-hand corner, similar to our characters. And so they can be targeted for attacks. You can also heal them. But the difference between these two is this ally over here has a keyword taunt. And so any allies that have that keyword in play must be targeted first whenever you're attacked by your opponent, which means it sort of serves as sort of like a shield to your characters, because defeating your allies is fine, but if your characters are ever fully defeated, you lose the game, right? So they're sort of like your punching bag. Now, when playing cards, the one thing that you have to be very mindful of is your card limit in your battlefield. You can't just play as many cards as you want. Each of your characters in your character area has a certain number next to the card slots. And so our characters here has +1 as well as +2. And so the amount of cards that you're able to play in your battlefield is equal to the sum of those values +1. So on our player mat here, we're allowed to have a total of 4 cards in our battlefield.
No more.
If ever you want to add an additional card past your limit, then you just simply discard one of the ones that you have here. And that's including your avatars, which we haven't really talked about too much. So we kind of briefly mentioned a few ways in which you can put these avatars in play. Each of your characters has a specific ability that allows you to put them in play, but sometimes you'll see cards in your deck that'll also do it. Now, when doing so, you choose one of your avatars and then you place them into your battlefield, always to the right, by the way, of all of your cards here. And then you get to orient the power core just like in your character area. Some of your avatars will have certain effects that happen when putting the card into play, and some avatars have abilities that come into effect when you unmake them. And so unmaking an avatar basically means removing it from play. Whenever you remove an avatar from play, you're permanently removing them from the game.
Right.
So you have to be a little bit cautious as to when you do that. But for example, the great god Pan over here says when you unmake this avatar, you get to destroy an avatar that has at least one wound. So if you time unmaking your avatars properly, they can be quite strong. And so going back to our actions, the third type of action that you can take is rotating a power core. So you can just choose one of the cards that you have in play that have a power core, rotate it, and resolve its ability just like you did at the start of your turn. So this might be a good way for you to gain abilities kind of back to back, or do what Naveen was kind of mentioning, where you kind of program your actions to benefit you the most.
Yeah, you want to kind of set yourself up so that you have the sweetest turn possible.
Once you're done taking both of your actions, then you move to the draw step of your turn, which requires you to draw one card from the top of your deck and then discard down to 5. So if at this point you have more than 5 cards in your hand, you just discard down.
Yeah, it's a waste.
Then you do any end of turn effects, if there are any on any of the cards, and play proceeds to the next player. And you basically continue playing like this until someone has either been completely defeated because their character area has gone all the way down to 0 health, or somebody tries to draw a card from their deck and there are no cards left.
So that is essentially how you play the game. There are a lot of exceptions to rules which are based on the cards. Our copy of the game came with 16 different characters. And remember, you're only going to pick 2 per person. So there's a ton of different combinations of different things that can happen that kind of change and alter the way you're going to play.
Now, again, this game is currently on Kickstarter. So if you're interested in checking out their campaign, we've left a link to their campaign down below. But before that, if you have any questions about anything that you saw today, please feel free to leave a comment down below and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you all so much for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more like this in the future, please consider subscribing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.